today in numeracy we're going to be continuing on with our fractions topic, and we're looking at finding quarters of amounts. So if you've not already, could you please get yourself a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper just so that you can work through some of the problems in the PowerPoint, and then we'll then discuss the answers. Okay, so as always, we're going to start off with our learning intention grid so that we know what we're learning, how we're learning it, and why we are learning it. So we are learning to find a quarter of an amount. Today, you're going to be learning this through this PowerPoint, through some worksheets that you've been assigned in Teams that you can do either by printing off or writing directly on the worksheets with a digital pen. There's also some games that you can play that will really develop your understanding. I have created a Kahoot quiz that has some revision as well as some questions that will relate to the learning from today. And also you've got your active task suggestion as well in the assignment. Now, if you find this tricky today, you can use counters to help you. And there are also interactive counters, and I've filmed a separate video that you can watch if you would like to understand how you can use counters to help you. I have also uploaded a times table mat which will come in handy for when you're really looking at using your division to help you if you need a wee reminder of your 4 times table. And I've also posted some links to some additional videos on YouTube that you may also want to watch as well if you're just finding this quite tricky and would like to see it explained in a different way. Now, if you're thinking, do you know what, actually, I'm quite confident with this concept and I would quite like a challenge. Well, I've uploaded some challenge questions that really require you to use your reasoning skills. And I've also uploaded a link to a Flipgrid where you need to do some problem solving to try and solve the dragon's problem, so tying in with our topic there. And then after you have done your task, you're also going to continue on learning by self-assessing your work using traffic lights. And as you know, you would just put a red traffic light if you find this tricky, a yellow traffic light if you think you need a wee bit of practice, and a green traffic light if you're good to go and you've got a really good level of understanding and you found your task today quite easy and you're managed to do it independently. So why are we learning this? Why are we learning to find a quarter of an amount? Well, we want to be successful learners who can correctly identify a quarter of an amount. You'd also want to be responsible citizens who think back to your prior learning about fractions, because this isn't something entirely new. We've done a lot of work already and this is just the next step in your understanding. And if you think back to what we already know, it makes it easier to learn new knowledge. We also want to be effective contributors who can share our thinking, which is what you'll be doing through your Flipgrid and through your reasoning. And also to be able to share things equally between yourself and your friends. If you've got a packet of chocolate and you want to be able to share that packet equally between your friends, then it's really good to know how to find fractions of amounts. Okay, so moving on now to the last part of our learning intention grid, which is the success criteria column. This is what you need to do to be successful today. You need to recognise that splitting an amount into quarters means having an amount, then having it again. You also need to understand and remember that quarters are equal groups, and we were talking about that in yesterday's assignment. You need to be able to calculate quarters of amounts by dividing an amount by 4, okay, and really using your knowledge of the 4 times table to help us today. And then finally, you need to be able to discuss or to talk about the division strategies that you can use to help you, and then apply this understanding to finding a quarter of an amount. So thinking back to what you remember about division, about using your tables mat, about using your fingers, about using equal groups, and all of this is going to come in handy with today's task. Okay, so let's just then think back to some of the key words that we're going to be using in fractions. So of course we have number, which is figures we use to count. A quarter, which means to split into 4 equal groups, and equal, which means the same amount. Let's reflect a bit more then on our prior knowledge before we get started. So think for a minute about what we already know about quarters and what we already know about finding fractions of amounts, because we've already looked at finding a half of an amount. So just take a minute to think back. You might want to pause this video. You might want to jot down some of your ideas before we move forward with new learning. Right, so hopefully you remember that finding quarters means splitting something into 4 equal groups. And hopefully you remember about finding a half of a group, which we're about to go into now, and hopefully that will jog your memory a bit and help you understand how to find a quarter of an amount. So, finding half. Do you remember that we said the denominator when we're finding half is 2, which means we need to split an amount into 2 parts, 2 equal parts. And the numerator is 1, so we want to find out how many are in one of these 2 groups. Remember that to find half of a number of objects, you need to divide them by 2. And we've got an example here, and this was again in our last slides. We're just really jogging our prior knowledge. So here we've got 8 cupcakes, and we want to find half of this group. And we're going to divide them into 2 children, and hopefully you remember as well that we said the best way to do this was 1 for you, 1 for me, and sharing them out 1 at a time. And here we go, we've got the demonstration now that shows us this. And this is a really good way to actually work out problems using counters or using anything that you have in your house. You can see that now there are 2 equal groups. And how many cakes does each child have? Well, they have 4 cakes. So half of 8 is 4. And you can see that here written using the fraction notation, where it says half of 8 equals. So let's use then what we know about finding a half of an amount to really apply towards finding a quarter of an amount. So when we're finding a quarter of an amount, the denominator is now 4. So we need to split an amount into 4 equal parts. And the numerator is still 1, so we want to find out, well, how many are in one of these 4 groups? So let's then have a look at finding a quarter. Now, in this first example, it is asking us to count the number of bones. So let's count together then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 bones here. So we're looking to find a quarter of 8. So the word problem is asking us to divide the bones between the 4 dogs so they each have the same number each. And you can see that word divide is there. Okay, so we're thinking, well, we need to divide in this word problem, and there is the number 4. Okay, so we're dividing 8 by 4. How many bones will each dog have? Well, you can see here how we could work this out. So here we've got the 4 dogs, and they would each have 2 bones, because you can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 equal groups. So we have split 8 into 4, and now each group has got 2. So 1 quarter, one of these 4 groups is 2. So 1 quarter of 8 equals 2. Right, well, let's have a look then at a different example. Now, this time there are 12 cakes, and this girl wants to share them equally between 4 friends, which is really a problem we might have maybe in school, maybe in the playground, maybe at your birthday. So she's wondering, well, how many cakes would each friend get if I shared these 12 cakes amongst 4 people? So what is a quarter of 12? So we're going to this time draw groups to help us. So we're going to share the cakes equally into 4 groups. So you can see here we've got the 1 at a time method. And you can see now that they have shared out the 12 cakes and between 4 groups, and in each group there is 3 cakes, and all of these groups are equal. So 1 quarter of 12 equals 3. Now, another strategy that you can use is the half and half again strategy. example, if we wanted to find out what a quarter of 12 was, we could start off by thinking, well, what is half of 12? And we should know that half of 12 is 6, okay? Because we know that if we divided 12 by 2, it's 6. And then we can have 6 and half of 6, so 6 divided by 2 is 3. Which means that we know that a quarter of 12 equals 3. So we can use the have and have again strategy to also help us find quarters of amounts. Now you can also use your tables knowledge to help you, which is where a times table mat can also support you if you're finding this tricky. So here we have the 4 times table, and our question is asking us, what is 1 quarter of 20? So you would just need to look for 20 in your times tables, and here it is here, and you're saying, well, what times 4 equals 20? And it's 5 times 4 equals 20, so 20 divided by 4 equals 5. So your answer would be 5. Another example is, what is 1 quarter of 32? So here we find 32, and we're saying, well, 32 divided by 4 would be what? Is 8. So we're using our knowledge of the inverse that we spent some time on to help us find the answers. So a quarter of 32 equals 8. Okay, so now let's apply this knowledge to some problem solving scenarios here. Now, the first question is asking us, what is a quarter of 4? So what I would like you to do at home is to pause the video and use one of the strategies that we have spoken about to help you, okay, to find out, well, what is a quarter of 4? And then press play when you're ready. So, a quarter of 4. If I had 4 and I split it into 4 equal groups, well, in each group I would just have 1. So, a quarter of 4 equals 1. Got another problem here, and it's asking us, well, what is a quarter of 16? And again, what you can do is pause the video and try to work out this answer and press play when you are ready. Okay, so I'm going to draw out this answer, boys and girls. So I'm going to draw a grid, and I'm going to put the 16 into the 4 equal groups using that 1 for you, 1 for you, 1 for you, 1 for you strategy. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I have split 16 amongst 4 groups, and in each of those groups there are 1, 2, 3, 4. So a quarter of 16 equals 4. I wonder what strategy you are using at home to figure these out. You'll need to let me know. Now, the next question is, what is 1 quarter of 20? So you might want to use your tables knowledge for this one. You might be thinking, well, 4 times what equals 20, or 20 divided by 4 is what? You might be drawing this one out. Okay, so pause the video, have a go and try and solve this problem and press play when you are ready. Okay, so I know that 20 divided by 4 equals 5, so I know that a quarter of 20 equals 5. I can actually check that, boys and girls. I can add up 5 4 times to check that. So 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, so a quarter of 20 is 5. Right, now we've got a word problem here. So our question is, Lexi had 20 grapes. She gave a quarter of them to Sam. How many did Sam get? So we know that Lexi has 20 grapes starting off with, and we want to find a quarter of them. Okay, so it's a quarter of 20. Now, can you please pause the video and have a go at this? Just use any strategy that you would like to solve this. You might even want to go and get some counters or some sweets or anything that you have in your house to try and work this one out. Okay, so Lexi has 20 grapes, the quarter then to Sam. A quarter of 20 is 5. Which strategy did you use? Okay, we were just talking about an example that used the same numbers there, just in a different context. So it says here 5, but we know when we answer a word problem that we use part of the question in our answer. So we would say that Sam got 5 grapes. Okay, next question. We've got Miss Jones and she has 24 stickers and she's going to share them equally. So there is that language of division. Share them equally with 4 children. How many stickers did each child get? So I want you to think, first of all, how would you write this as a fraction calculation? Okay, and then I want you to have a go at solving this using a strategy that we have talked about. Okay, so press play when you're ready. So we want to find a quarter of 24, and a quarter of 24 is 6. Okay, because 24 divided by 4 is 6. And you can check that by counting up 6 4 times using repeated addition. So 6, 12, 18, 24. Okay? Got one more problem solving question here now. And this time, I think this is quite a bit of an easier one, boys and girls. I hope you think the same. We've got Rishi and he has 40 cars and a quarter of the cars were red. How many cars were red? So pause the video and have a go at solving this question and press play when you are ready to go over it. Okay, so we've got a quarter of 40, which really means we want to divide 40 by 4, and I know that 40 divided by 4 is 10, okay, because I know that 10 times 4 is 40. So 1 quarter of 40 equals 10. Now let's have a look again at our learning intention grid, and I really just want to focus in on this section here about if you think you're finding this tricky or if you need a challenge. Now, remember you can use counters to help you solve the questions as well. So if it's asking to find a quarter of 12, then you can get 12 counters and you can then share them equally amongst 4 groups. There are also interactive counters if you don't have real counters with you or if you can't print them out, and I filmed a separate video that shows you how to access this interactive resource and how to use it, okay? Now you can also use a times table mat as well to help you, just like you did for division, okay? And I'll post one of them in the assignment too. And I have also put in some links to some extra YouTube videos that might help. Remember, if you need a challenge, there are some reasoning questions that really have to make you think about how you've solved the problem. And there's also the Flipgrid problem as well, where you need to try and solve the dragon's problem. So a bit of problem solving for you to apply your skills to. And finally, don't forget to self-assess your work. Remember, it's red if you find it tricky, yellow if you think you need some practice, and green if you are good to go and feeling confident with finding a quarter of an amount and with the success criteria. Okay, boys and girls, so I hope you find that useful. Remember, you can ask me anything in the Ask the Teachers channel or write a wee note on the bottom of your worksheet when you submit it if you are finding this tricky. But hopefully that's all been very self-explanatory for you and you're feeling competent to get started on your task. Okay, boys and girls, so good luck with your task and bye for now.